it costs money to get a good editor. So what did you have lined up, or what got you to that point to say, you know what, I can make more money if I have these additional 4 hours every time I have to do an edit free, where I could go create 4 hours more content. What was that process, and how did you rationalize that?
The reality is, like you said, time is money, and you can look at like, what could you be doing with that time? And for me, it was even just like having more time to kind of like be creative and like reflect on what I'm doing and plan for what I should be doing next. Cause sometimes I didn't even have enough free time to do that.
Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Chris Browning. In this episode, Chris is going to tell us how he automated much of his workflow for pre and post production. But rather than me tell you all the cool stuff that we talked about with Chris, let's go ahead and start the show.
You are what I would call a great guest, because you are literally answering questions that Bodhi and I have here in our rundown before we ask them. So I was going to ask, what does your process look like? How, are you using a virtual assistant? Well, the answer to that is yes. You already told us that. Do you edit your own stuff? Bodhi just asked that question, but it's like, there's a lot of things that goes into being a creator, particularly one where this is what you do for a living. And I think that a lot of times, as I said earlier, people don't just think about it. They think that the amount of time that it takes you to create the video, or for them to consume the video, is the time that it took you to actually create it. And it could literally be days that goes into the creation of a video, or more, depending on what you're doing. So one of the things that, I wanted to do, as we wrap our time up, is just kind of talk about tactically some of the things that you're doing in your business. So I want to dig into, you said that you stopped, editing your own content about 3 years ago. What was the reason that you were editing on your own in the beginning? And what was the reason that made you actually decide to push that off to someone else? Because I think that is, a key element for a lot of creators. They may be doing things that they don't mind doing, or maybe even have some, they maybe even be good at doing it. But when they're looking at it from a business standpoint, it just doesn't necessarily make sense for them to continue to do it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And for me, I felt like I was at a slight advantage because I was comfortable with that stuff, with editing. It was something I did for fun anyways. Like I would just do random projects anyways, just 'cause I like doing it. And I have a lot of friends who got into podcasting who they were like, I don't like this. This is confusing to me. I don't want to touch this. But for me, it was just like, I got into it and did it myself just because it was fun to do. And I liked it. And also, I think it gave me an appreciation for the process too. I think it's probably a good idea for anyone to at least try editing their work a little bit, like dip your toe in there for editing just a little. 'Cause then I think you understand the flow, and it helps you, I think, also learn how you're speaking and your patterns and the things that you need to edit out because of the mistakes you make and the tics you have. You become more aware of that because you're like, oh, look at all these edits I have to make to clean this up to make it sound how I want it to sound. And you can start to learn how to adjust how you speak and how you appear on video because you're seeing the process. I think sometimes if you don't get to be hands on with it, maybe you don't become as familiar with how you present and how you speak and how you look visually. So if you can, I'd say give it a shot for at least a little while, or maybe every so often dip your toe in there, do a little bit of editing. But for me, what was a decision for me to make that switch over and to hire it out was that it was starting to become too time consuming for me, because if I want to do more content, it becomes harder. I become the bottleneck now in my business. And that's what I found. I became the holdup for so much stuff because everyone was waiting on me to do the edit, so that maybe the virtual assistant I use, she can help me write the show notes or come up with some social media graphics or pull something from what I'm working on because it's so rough, it's not ready for her to view yet. And I was like, I don't want to be that bottleneck anymore. And then also I realized it would free me up to do other things. Because like maybe I'm pretty quick at editing, but it's still not nothing. It's still not 0 minutes. Because, if you record let's say you record for 30 minutes, to me, to go through to a thorough edit, like you probably pass through it maybe a couple times, cutting out big mistakes and maybe doing cleanup to trim it up and all these other things. I mean, it could take you, 2 to 4 times the length of the actual recording to actually go through it and get it to that final version you're looking for. And so I was like, well, I could free up time every week, even if it's not my show's short and it's not that much time. I could free up something every week to allow me to do something else, especially if I want to do, like I said, up the amount of content that I'm producing. So that was like the ultimate decision. Was like, look, yes, there is a cost to this, and that's something you definitely have to factor in. But you think about, well, what else could you be doing with that time? Could you be increasing your income in other ways if you had that time free versus being the one who has to be both the content producer coming up with the content, the on camera or on mic talent, and then also then the editor at the end. If you have to be involved heavily in every one of those stages, there's a lot of time that you're using that you could be devoting to something else.
What came first, the chicken or the egg? Did you actually hire the editor out of pocket first, or did you have a project that you put the editor on that you paid them out of that? Because I think that is a sticking point for so many creators. Well, I got to pay this person. Well, instead of paying them, I'll just do it myself. Now we can get into, well, it costs you time. And here's the thing that I say about time. You can never get any more of it. All you can do is buy someone else's. But this is coming from someone who's been doing it for a while. For people who are new, I understand. I don't generally don't try to put my hands in people's pockets, but I understand that it costs money to get a good editor. So what did you have lined up, or what got you to that point to say, you know what, I can make more money if I have these additional 4 hours every time I have to do an edit free, where I could go create 4 hours more content. What was that process, and how did you rationalize that?
Yeah, that was hard for me too. Cause doing it for, free, quote unquote free, by doing it myself was appealing. Cause I was like, I can just keep any money I'm bringing in, especially in the earlier years when I wasn't bringing in a ton of money. I was like, I like the math on this, but, the reality is, like you said, time is money, and you can look at like, what could you be doing with that time? And for me, it was even just like having more time to kind of like be creative and like reflect on what I'm doing and plan for what I should be doing next. Cause sometimes I didn't have enough free time to do that. So I ended up just coming out of pocket. I had like, a little bit of revenue coming in, but it's probably not enough to cover all the editing full time. And so for me, it was just like, look, this is gonna maybe hurt for a little bit, and maybe some other work I'm doing can kind of like compensate for that, because maybe the podcast itself wasn't bringing enough to cover the full-time editor, but some of the other projects I would do on the side can help supplement that. And I was like, it's worth it, because this free time I'm getting here now allowed me to do so many other things. Allowed me, like, I wouldn't be able to, that randomly long list of things you said I was doing. There's no way I could have been kind of trying out writing for a little bit, like the men's health thing, or doing the additional podcast, or getting prepped and doing things for news segments. Like, all that takes extra time that I didn't have. And so by handing that off, it really just freed it up. Even like hiring, for example, the virtual assistant. Sarah's her name. She does a great job. She does like my show notes. She'll do some basic video editing for me. She'll do some communication with the guests when they're on, to let them know the episode's live. She does all these tasks that are small on their own, but when you add them up, that could be hours a week that I would have to be doing. And so those two hires really gave me not only the time to do other things that could generate income, but the other thing too is just like the mental space for rest, because constantly creating stuff is a drain on you. You feel it. After a while, you just keep making new stuff over and over and over again. Your mind is just like, I got nothing. I'm out. I got I have no new ideas for you. But when you give yourself that little bit of room, even if you're not making money with that time, but maybe you're like sitting down and watching a TV show you like, or taking a nap, or going to hang out with a friend for a little bit, like those little breaks you give yourself are so rejuvenating, and it keeps you going, because it's a grind. It's a hustle. You're constantly moving. You got to constantly be making things. So whatever you can do to increase that longevity, you got to take it.
When you're editing for yourself, you have a style, you have a way that you want it to look, and you have a way of editing. How do you choose an editor that matches that style? Because obviously you don't want to, 3 years into your show, you don't want to be like, there's a whole new way that my show looks, right? We don't want to shock our audience and make them go away. I mean, if more come, then great. But how do you choose that editor that kind of matches with your style, but also includes something else that's beneficial to the show?
That's a great question. And it's hard. It kind of reminds me, it's kind of like dating almost a little bit, because it's going to be rare that you look for an editor. That first editor is exactly everything you want, right? Because you don't know what their work ethic is like, what their creative style is like. If you work well together, you got to figure all those things out. And for me, I had to go through several editors, which can be difficult, right? It's kind of awkward to be like, you hire someone and then you're like, this didn't really work out. I don't really like your style. What I learned from a friend that ended up really helping me is that I started hiring people on a trial basis. So I said, hey, I'm looking for an editor, but I'm still trying to figure out the right person. Would you be up for working on a couple of videos for me? And, you pay them obviously, but you just say it's a limited project, and I'm depending on who I end up going with, or if this works out, this could turn into a longer term kind of like relationship or partnership. And so that way you're not on the hook immediately for being like, I got to work with this person. And it's like awkward, like firing of someone if you don't like what they do. They already know, we'll see how this goes. Also, the other thing is, because for me, I'm getting better at it. But I used to be very anti-confrontational. I hated the confrontation of like being like, oh, this sucks. I didn't like this. So for me, but what I learned is you have to communicate to whoever's working on your project, because ultimately you're paying them and you have to like it. So you don't have to be rude about it, but you have to be very upfront and say, this is what I didn't like, or this is what I think could be better, or this is more of what I'm looking for. And you have to make sure you can have that open channel of communication. That's also a way of weeding editors out as well. If they're not open to that, as long as if you're being polite and you're working well with them and they still don't want to, listen to you, take your feedback, this is not a good fit. But that's the key, is like letting them know, communicating what you like. I would make very detailed notes. I would take screenshots, or I would do like a screen recording and show them, okay, this is what I was looking for here. Or if I could provide them an example of either something I'd done in the past and this is what I wanted to look like, or if there's another creator who has content that's like, okay, there's an element of this I like, and this is kind of what I was imagining. Being able to give that feedback and notes really helps the process, because sometimes they're a good editor. You just didn't do a good job of communicating to them what it is you want. And so you have to make sure that you're being clear, you're being direct, you're showing exactly what it is you want. And then that definitely helps those relationships. But it may take some time. You may go through, 3 or 4 editors before you find that one who kind of gives you what you're looking for.
Did you use the same style of process for finding your virtual assistant, to where you put them on a project first before bringing that person on full time?
I wish I would have. I did not do that. And I also have had several VAs, but oftentimes it wasn't because of firing or anything like that. Sometimes they just got busy, because a lot of these people who do this virtual assistant work, they're doing this as like a side hustle. So some of them, maybe they're a stay-at-home parent, or sometimes it's like something they do after work on the weekends. And so sometimes you just lose people because, something changed in their life. They got a job, they moved, something may happen like that. But that was a little bit harder for me because there's so much onboarding. I had to show them so many like my process and things that I needed them to do. But I think you could also do that as well. Even if you want to do like pieces of it, like, okay, I'm going to do a trial run on my show notes with this person. I have another person who do a trial run with doing the graphics, the images I need. And I think that process would have worked a little bit better. I lucked out and I got this person, Sarah, was recommended to me from a friend. So she was actually the sister of a friend of mine, and they were like, oh, hey, my sister does this. I'm like, I don't know. If this doesn't work out, it's going to be real awkward. But I trusted them enough and gave it a shot, and was just upfront in the beginning with them. Like, hey, I'm looking for someone. I've had a hard time. So, just want to see how this is going to go. And they were very open to just like, let's seeing how the first couple of months went. If we both liked the process, because they could not like me as well. But I lucked out and found a really great person to work with. But yeah, I think the trial run, even with anyone you're hiring, if you can start them off on something short, that way it makes it a little bit easier to cut ties if it doesn't really work out.
Chris, we did want to, as we're getting towards the end of the show, we jump into what we call like a rapid fire. They never are rapid fire. They're never rapid fire questions, but we really wanted to focus on with you is that you are a fu-time creator, and you've talked about some of the tools, like you mentioned ClickUp, but just tactically, what are you, what does your tech stack look like? If you could just throw out the names of a few products, as far as I'm using ClickUp, here's what I'm using it for. I'm using this tool. Here's what I'm using it for. If you could just throw out 3 or 4 different tools like that and how you're using them in your business, tactically, I think that would do a lot for our audience, because they're looking to be more efficient in the things that they're doing as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I love talking about this side of things. So just starting from like the initial, like recording of the interviews, I use Riverside just like you guys do. It's been for me, one of the most stable ones that I've used. I've tried a ton in the past, and I know there've been updates. So there are probably other ones who have, made improvements over the years as well. But, to me, I love it because I just like, something that'll give me clean audio, video, local recording on both sides. It's always what I'm looking for. Once it's recorded, what I use for my editing, because I still do some of my audio processing, because one of the things I found was that like why some of the shows I liked the way they sounded and the way they kind of the clarity and the crispness of the voices, that they're doing a lot of like EQ, post processing, cleanup of the audio. And I just thought these people must have the most expensive mic and it just all comes out great. But the reality is they're doing a lot of work on that audio after it's been recorded. And so for me, I use Reaper is the DAW, the digital. I said DAW like I forgot what that even stands for, but my audio editing software that I use. It's basically, I loved it because it's not a subscription based software. I think I paid $60 for it, and I got lifetime license to the software. Now I think now they've had a recent update, so I had to pay if I want to go to this next version. But I'd already upgraded like 3 or 4 versions for free. But I like it because very clean, easy to use, and then I also throw in some plugins. So I use plugins from Wave. They have some good ones for audio cleanup. So I use one that's like a denoiser. It's really great for killing the echo in my room because I'm just in a spare bedroom in my apartment here, and it can be a little echoey. So I'll throw that on. It does a great job of killing that echo sound. I use one for leveling. So, sometimes you move a little bit farther away from your mic or you're too close and your voice is naturally kind of sometimes goes up and down. It kind of helps level it out so you have equal audio all the way across. I use one for EQ that's just built into it just so I can maybe you want to bring up the bass or you want to lower some of the highs and clean it up. So I love going through that process. So sometimes I'll still do that for myself or my guests just because I can dial it in for what I want it to sound like. And then I'll pass it off to my editor to do the actual editing of the show. Past that, when it comes to like project management, I think I already mentioned it. I use ClickUp because it's just, you can create these like spaces. I have one dedicated for the podcast episodes, one for social media, and then one for YouTube videos. And so I spent a lot of time going through that thing, but you can make these automations in there. So I have an automation set up to where I make one card inside of the podcast board. And then if I know there's going to be a YouTube video associated with it, I can click a little box and it will duplicate that card and make one in my YouTube board, and same for social media. And then it has each stage of the workflow as I go. So I have a column that's going to be for like pre-production ideas, like things I'm just like, these could be episodes. Then once it's ready to go, I move it into the production column. Like, okay, now this is stuff I'm actually going to start working on. Then it goes from there into the recording column. So these are the ones I'm actively working on some stage of recording for that episode. Then one for the editor, show notes, notifying guests. So I have like a whole process. So that way I can visually see where any given episode is along that production process. And that's for me was key to be able to like open this up and see where I'm at with these episodes and what I need to do and maybe what I'm missing. And then my VA can go in there and she can also move cards along in the process, leave her notes. We can talk back and forth on that individual episode. She can drop artwork. I can put in links to the Dropbox folder with the audio file so she can listen to a draft of it. It's just a great way to keep everything consolidated in one spot, like centralized. And then outside of that, I say the only other tool I can think of right now is I do like a tool called Loom, Loom. And that's great for doing like screen recordings. So if I want to show like especially when the VA was new, when Sarah was new, I would say, okay, this is what I do here. This is how you move these cards, these episodes through the ClickUp process. Or, hey, this is something that you did for me on this graphic. I kind of would like it if it looked like this. Or here's something I did. Here's an example of it. And it's just a great way to visually be able to explain something without having to like hop on a Zoom call every time. Like, you got to go through the whole scheduling process and make sure you're free, but I can just send a link to a Loom video on something I did. And it makes it so much easier to kind of show visually and then communicate whatever question or issue I might have.
I would imagine that some of the pre-process or pre-show stuff that you do, you would use ClickUp. Is there anything else you use, like when you're looking at, what kind of topics should I discuss? What does your pre-show routine look like?
Ooh, okay. That's a great question. So for pre-show, my notes can sometimes be all over the place. I'm not even gonna lie. Sometimes I'm working now to kind of consolidate them because sometimes I'll use Apple Notes for like my quick little bullet points if I'm kind of jotting down ideas or coming up with like script ideas for an episode. Sometimes I'll use Notion if I want to keep track of like a knowledge base, kind of like they call it like a second brain, right? Where you dump all this data in and keep track of all the notes you have. Instead of having to relearn it all over again, I can kind of go back and reference that. So that's those two tools where I kind of are keeping a lot of the information that I'm working on. And then I also use something called Airtable along with Calendly for my guests. So Calendly is just like a scheduling tool, something you can create your calendar and availability. You can attach it to like your Apple or Google calendar, and then that way it can reference your actual availability on your calendar. And then I send that out to guests. So that way we don't do the back and forth. It's just like, here, this is when I'm available, and they can go through and pick a date. And then once they select it, I have it automatically forward them to Airtable, which is like another database, by a piece of, not a piece of software, but a database like website where you can have like all of it consolidated. So I have a form, they fill it out, they put in their picture, information about themselves, what links they want to share, their social media handles. And then that goes into one big database where I can, whenever I need to know a little bit about them before an interview, or when the VA, when Sarah's in there making the graphics, she knows where to grab an image of them. It just keeps it nice and clean. So those are, like, in the pre-production lead up to the episode, those are a couple of things I use to kind of keep my ideas together and then keep the information about the guest together, along with ClickUp, which has like the, the database at that point of all the episodes I've been working on.
Yeah, I remember when you had me on Popcorn Finance, I was really impressed by the Airtable Calendly integration. It's like, oh, he's professional. It's like, oh, he is absolutely saving time. And I would imagine it probably took you a few minutes to actually create the workflow. But once it's created, it's just kind of done. So if you're saving yourself 10 minutes every episode that you record over the course of the year, that's 2 work weeks.
Oh yeah, it makes a difference. Yeah, it can be intimidating because, like, I didn't know how to use any of those websites or pieces of software before that. But, I spent, several hours making sure it worked and tweaking it and changing it and figuring out what was going wrong. But once it's done, like you said, now I can just have one link. I actually even have a keyboard shortcut created. In Apple, you can create like those shortcuts that'll, like, you type in short, series of letters and it'll fill it in with whatever you have it programmed to do. So even for, like, when I'm sending links to guests, I do PCFG, that's Popcorn Finance Guests, and it automatically expands out to the URL. So when I'm even sending an email, I can just type that in, boom, go straight to them. And I don't have to think about it. And automatically, through my site, I host it on WordPress. So there's something called Pretty Links. That's what it's called. Pretty Links. It's a plugin. And then you can put in and forward any web address to one using your domain. So even though I'm using, for example, a Calendly link, I can put it in there and have it have popcornfinance.com/guests forward to my Calendly link that I provided with. So it looks professional, it looks clean, and I don't have to do a bunch of work. It takes less than a minute to make one of those links and send it out. But yeah, like, those little things, they take a little while to figure out, but oh man, it saves me so much time in the long run.
I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I'm just curious, like, how did you stumble upon pushing all of these things together? Because I'm not hearing like an if this then that type service that you got in between there. You just found things that just kind of played well with each other.
It was kind of trial and error. Like, I was big on Trello for a while. Airtable used to be my only one I used for everything. And now I just leave it as like my guest intake database, basically. There's probably a piece of this I could migrate over to ClickUp, but they work so well already that I kind of keep them as they are. But for me, I'm one of those people who, like, I love just trying things. Like, I'm okay with just signing up for a new service and just using it for a little bit and see if I like it, because it's one of those things, like, you just don't know. You don't know if it works for you unless you get in there and try it. Cause it could just be like a UI, like a user interface thing where it's like, I just don't like the way this looks. This bothers me every time I go to this website. So maybe that's not the one for you. Or it's like, there's this little quirk where, the integration between these two services don't really work well. You just won't know until you try it. And so for me, it's like, it is kind of hard. Like, it's hard to just say this is the perfect workflow, because it works for me right now, but a new service could come along that I'm like, hey, this actually does what I'm using better. And then I have to make the judgment call on, is it worth me taking all my processes and move it over to something else? Or is what I'm using good enough? But yeah, I think it was really just like straight trial and error thing. And I would, like, if I got too frustrated with something, then I would just go online and start looking around. I would just start Googling, like, okay, services. I would go I'll go on Google, Reddit, and then I'll put Reddit in the search along with services like Trello, services like ClickUp. And then I would just go through and read Reddit posts of where people have used it and see, like, okay, did they like this? What's real? Is this an ad? Did someone work for this company and put this post in here? You go through all those things trying to figure it out. And then, yeah, it was just straight trial and error until I landed on something. I was like, okay, I really like this. This works for what I'm doing.
Chris, we have 3 distinct types of episodes here on Beyond the Post. The one that we're doing now, these are the interviews. These go out to, everyone hits them. And then we do what we call Between the Posts, where it's Bodie and I just having conversations and talking about, not necessarily, we're not going to go back and rehash the entire episode that we do with you or with another guest, but we're just talking about some of the things that may have come up, because we try to build a theme for our, for our episodes. And then we do what are called, between the post and the behind the post. And those are specifically for our patrons. And I see you coming back and, getting on the show. It won't take an hour the next time, but come back on and just walk us through how you use Airtable with Calendly or something like that, or how you're using ClickUp or something like that. Those tactical things, because, questions that we get all the time are, what systems are you using? And it's a lot easier to show someone a system when they say, here's what I'm using and here is why I'm using it. This is what it's doing for me in my business. So yeah, I want to loop you in right now and just say, hey, I want to get you back on the show to do, one of our other types of episodes, and where you can, very specifically walk through your process of how you're getting some things done, because I can only imagine with the Calendly integration that you have, with Airtable, that saves you immense amount of time. Going back. I mean, if you just think about you and I, we have been going back and forth for probably the last couple. Hey man, I think I want to get you on the show. What's a good day for you? What's a good month for you? Is just that going back and forth. That is all but eliminated with, the setup that you've put in place. So we definitely want to have you back to talk about that.
Oh, yeah, happy to.
Want to also be respectful of your time. And, not keep you too much longer than we had agreed upon. But at this point, I would like to know, is there anything that you would say that you would want to say, to our, to our listeners? Like I said, we have a lot of folks. They're not all podcasters. They're not all YouTubers. We have a mix of just creators in general. But if there's any words of wisdom that you would like to leave for folks who are right now, what they're doing is a side hustle, but they are thinking about, how do I move this into the full-time arena? Is there any words of wisdom that you want to drop for those folks?
Oh, the thing that immediately popped to my mind was, it's from a conversation that you and I had when we were working on another interview together for another podcast. And this topic came up of, what would I tell the people who are thinking about getting into this? And for me, the biggest thing that comes to my mind is, make sure if this is a project you're working on that you just enjoy doing it, because you're going to be doing it a lot. It's going to take up large chunks of your time. And if you aren't really interested in the topic, if you have no passion or joy that comes to you from doing it, it's going to be a hard journey. I don't know how you would stick with it if you really don't like it. If I hated personal finance, there's no way in the world I would still be doing this podcast. I would have been done a long time ago, because it's a lot of me just looking at personal finance articles, thinking about personal finance, talking about it. It keeps happening over and over and over again. And so you got to find something you enjoy in the process. There has to be something that you take away from it, because money will be nice, of course. We all would like money from this work that we're doing, but it has to be a little bit more than that. I think for you to actually enjoy the process, you have to make sure whatever it is you're covering, whatever it is you're talking about, you get some type of personal fulfillment from it, something that you like, something that you could keep talking about for years, because it's a long journey. So it should at least be enjoyable for you if you're going to keep trying to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, where would people find you? We've talked about Popcorn Finance a lot, but obviously you're in a lot of different places. What's the best way for people to find out what you're up to?
Oh yeah, best way is you can find the podcast exactly where you listen to the show. Just look for Popcorn Finance. You find me there on all the apps. But also, if you want to connect with me, you can go to Instagram, Popcorn Finance Podcast over there, or TikTok, just regular Popcorn Finance there, and of course popcornfinance.com. So everything's all over there. Just those two words, Popcorn Finance, you'll find me pretty much every place.
Well, Chris Browning from Popcorn Finance and pretty much every place else on the internet, because I don't think there's a job that you don't have at this point. We really appreciate you, bro, for coming on and hanging out with us for this hour and just going through some of the things that you do in your creator business. It's, I've talked to you about this stuff on multiple occasions now, and I find out something new every single time. So I really appreciate your time, and, and hope that you have enjoyed, hollering at Bodie and I.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thanks for the invite. It was great getting talking with the two of you. I had a great time there.